Hello students, I welcome you all in the Constitutional Law class, lecture number 6 in the CLAT lecture series sponsored by Sri Jayendra Rank Zone. I am your mentor Shekhar Gehlot. So till now we have done almost all of the fundamental rights. Only 2-3 fundamental rights are left to be done, which we will close in this particular session. So what is Article 29 and 30 of the Constitution of India? Article 29 and 30, they are read, these two are a bundle article, they are read together. They are not read separately from each other, they work in joint operation. Article 29 and 30 are known as cultural and linguistic minority education rights. You all understand the meaning of word culture? Culture means the way of life. Okay, so when we talk about Hindu culture has its own way of life, or Islamic culture has its own rules and regulations or way of life. We should not confuse this culture with the religious way of life. Okay, culture is separate, religion is separate. Sometimes they may intermingle with each other, but usually culture is overall the way of life you live, your tradition. Okay, festivals you celebrate, how you treat your elders, how you take care of your youngers, how you treat someone who has come to your house, or how you take over the life as a whole. Okay, so like Hindu culture, we believe in afterlife and the previous life as well. This is a part of our culture. And linguistic means something to do with the language. Okay, cultural and linguistic minority. So what is a minority? Minority is a community which is in very small number as compared to the other major communities in India or that state. Okay, so minority here we are discussing is not religious minority. Like in India, Muslim is a religious minority. Okay, but this article is talking about purely cultural and linguistic minorities which are arranged on the basis of their culture and linguistic minority. So I say that Hindu is a major religion in India. Okay, but still a section of Hindu which have their own a section of Hindus which have their separate culture. Okay, they can also get benefited by this particular freedom or by this particular right. Okay, so here we are talking about cultural rights, cultural minorities. Okay, not a religious minority. So even a Hindu for that matter may be a cultural minority, or a Muslim may be a cultural majority here. Okay, so like suppose there is a section of Hindu in Himalayas where a wife can have more than one husband. Okay, or there are some sections where husband can have more than one wives. Okay, husband can have more than one wives, or a wife can have more than one husband, or sometimes religious ceremonies are different. Okay, so this is a culture. These minorities who have these kind of culture, they're separate culture. Okay, and they have a separate language minorities, like we have Sanskrit speakers. Okay, though Sanskrit has been a parent language, this is the language from which all other languages originated, but still we may have Sanskrit as a minority today. Why? Because the number of Sanskrit speakers are very less. Okay, now when we are talking about a linguistic minority, we are not talking about those languages which have become uh, which are very which don't have a status of a major language. Though Sanskrit had a status of a major language sometime, but now the number of speakers are very less. Okay, so may say in some state English may be a minority language. Okay, because there may not be very many speakers or many users of that language given that particular area or that state. Okay, so it keeps on, it depends upon area to area, state to state, linguistic minority, or we may say, anyhow we'll discuss it, uh, cultural and linguistic minority and the educational rights. Okay, any section of citizens residing in the territory of India, okay, or any part thereof having a distinct language. So this is, first of all, we are talking about citizen only, citizen alone. Okay, it does not give right to any foreigner like a foreigner, a group of foreigners come and set up their own household or small country or township in some part of country, and then they can claim that we also have a cultural and linguistic educational rights. No, this right is not guaranteed to any foreigner or non-Indian citizen. Only citizens of India, territory of India, any part thereof having a distinct language, script, or culture of its own shall have the right to conserve the same. Okay, some community which has a distinct language or their script. Script means the way you write it. Writing a language is its script. Shall have the right to conserve the same. Okay, they shall have the right to conserve this minority status of their language. Why conservation is very much relevant here? Because there is a threat of extinction. Okay, there is a threat of extinction. So these minorities, their culture and their language, we are trying to preserve them. Constitution is trying to preserve it so that there is no threat of extinction, because the number of users are very less. So we want to preserve it. Okay, why? Because this is part of our composite culture, our rich heritage of India, that we boast of these many cultural and linguistic minorities, or these many kinds of culture or language speakers reside in India. That is a part of our heritage and we must preserve it. And the best way to preserve something from a language from extinction is by education. Okay, the best way to preserve something which is in form of language is to educate people about this language, spread the awareness about the language, tell and increase the number of users of the language, either written or vocal manner. So educational means are the best way to preserve, conserve and thrive a language. So that is why Constitution grants rights to these cultural and linguistic minorities to set up their own educational institutions. No citizen shall be denied admission into any educational institution maintained by the state or receiving aid out of the state funds on ground of religion, race, caste, language, or any one of them. It now further clarifies that though you may be a minority institution or you may be belonging to a language or cultural minority, but no citizen shall be denied admission. You cannot deny admission to any citizen in any educational institution which is maintained by the state or receiving aid out of the state funds, okay, on grounds of religion, race, caste, language, or any of them. Only these four grounds. Now I tell you what this article means. Okay, there was a court case between Saint Saint Xavier College versus Government of India. Okay, so what happened in this Saint Xavier's College? This Saint Xavier College was a Christian minority institution, and it was receiving funds from the state government. for its operation. Okay, for its operation. But anyhow, somehow, when the admissions came up, it refused admission to people who did not belong to their particular cultural setup. It refused, say, it refused admissions to Hindu or Muslim students. It said this institute attained the status of a premier institute due to because of its faculty or so many other features. So everybody wants an admission into this particular college, but it refused admission to people from Hindu, Muslim, or other religions or other race or other language speakers. Okay, so now they went to the court. Government imposed condition on them that you have to admit 50% students of other religion as well. So they went to the court by alleging that their right to cultural and linguistic minority institutions is infringed by the government by imposing this particular restriction. Then court clarified it that just because you are receiving funds from the state, now you cannot deny admission on these grounds. Okay, because religion, Hindu and Muslim is a religious ground, therefore you cannot deny that. But yes, if you were not receiving funds, not receiving aid from state, then in that case, yes, very well they could have refused admission. Any Christ institution or any Muslim institution or Hindu institution, sorry, Hindu is not a minority institution, any institution which is minority and not receiving funds from the state can definitely deny admission on these grounds as well. Okay, now we move to Article 30. All minorities, whether based on religion or language, shall have right to establish and administer educational institutions of their choice. Now, these minorities, all minorities, whether based on religion or language. Okay, now we come about religion as well. Earlier we were talking only about culture and language. Now religion is also added to it. The minorities based on religion or language, like I just told you example of Saint Xavier College, it was a Christian minority because based upon the religion. So all minorities, whether based on religion or language, shall have the right to establish and administer their educational institution of their choice. They shall have the right to establish an educational institution plus administer. Okay, they also have freedom to decide working hours, syllabus, examination pattern, qualifications of faculty, salary, and all. Okay, they shall have right to administer educational institutions of their choice. They shall have right to decide all these things. Okay, usually when I set up a institution which is not a religious or language minority institution, then I have to subscribe to the government instructions. Okay, government instructions are there for the educational institutions. The government gives you a standard pattern of behavior or administering a educational institution. But in these kind of cases, when your educational institution is based on minority status, whether on religion or language, you have right to choose your own administration. You are not bound to support. You are not bound to follow these government guidelines anymore. In making any law providing for compulsory acquisition of any property of educational institution established and administered by a minority, referred to in clause 1, the state shall ensure that amount fixed by or determined under such law for acquisition of such property, such as would not restrict or abrogate the right guaranteed under the clause. Now, this is a very thoughtful addition. This is very thoughtful addition into the this article itself. Now what happens, this article gives you right to set up a minority institution, okay, based upon religion or language. But the constitution framers thought that tomorrow suppose one Christian minority sets up an educational institution. 5 crore rupees was the funds used to set up and run the educational institution. Now tomorrow government may come up with a scheme that we will acquire this particular portion of land in which your college is also situated, and then the government may acquire the land and pay rupees 1 crore to the college for the acquisition. Now this college is on the verge of collapsing because now they have already invested 5 crore rupees, and they, being minority, they could not muster out so much money. But now government, somehow they have done it, but government acquired it and paid only 1 crore rupees. Now the Christian minority will lapse, this educational institution will lapse. So, Constitution framers said that when you are acquiring the land on which this particular institution is situated, you should make compensation in such a manner that it does not kill down the institution. It lets the institution breathe and survive as well. So, the compensation in this case could be 6 to 7 to 8 crore rupees, but not less than 5 crore rupees. Okay, why? Because now 6, 7, 8 crore rupees is required, because the institution will have to go to some other location, rebuild themselves, and re-administer everything. So it requires additional funds. So funds should be given in such nature that they are still able to exercise their right guaranteed by the article 30 subclause 1. Okay, this is added taking in view that tomorrow there may be a government which is majoritarian in nature. Okay, tomorrow there may be a government which is majoritarian in nature, or suppose there is a government which follows Islamic rule or Hindu rule, and then they may feel like that we should kill all these Christian minority institutions because they are not Hindu. Okay, and how to do that? Now they have a right, these Christian minorities have been granted a right into the Constitution of India. So let us do one thing, let us come up with a scheme and acquire the land and then give very less compensation so that they cannot again re-establish the institution. Okay, in order to prevent this kind of the abuse in any foreseeable situation, the constitution framers thought it fit to put this particular clause in writing as well. The state shall not, in granting aid to educational institutions, discriminate against any educational institution on the ground that it is under the management of a minority, whether based on religion or not. Okay, now what happens usually? These educational institutions receive funds from the state. When I say state, I mean to say either state government or the central government, but government altogether. Okay, so education institutions receive funds from the state periodically, yearly or biannually manner, whatever the government and the arrangement between the institution is. Government keeps on providing assistance, financial assistance, technical assistance, staff assistance, etc. to the educational institutions. Okay, because state feels that more the number of educational institutions, more the people will have access to the education. So state feels it important that institutions should be kept running, and if any financial hindrance is coming to their way, state should help them financially as well. So suppose now state says we'll provide 20 crore rupees to institutions. Okay, so now when providing this 20 crore rupees to the institutions, government should not say that Hindu institute will have 20 crore while Christian will get only 2 crore. They cannot do so. Okay, state shall not, in granting aid to the educational institutions, discriminate against any educational institution on the ground that it is under the management of a minority, whether based on religion or language. So when state is granting aid, it should grant aid equally. If it doesn't grant aid to anyone, it is okay, but if it grants aid to the educational institutions, so when it is granting 20 crore to a Hindu institution, it should also grant the same amount to the Christian institution as well. Okay, it depends upon the size of the institutions as well. Comparison can always be within the comparables only. Minorities are those communities or class of individuals who are very marginalized in comparison to the Indian diaspora. Thus, all such minorities, based upon their cultural practices or linguistic practices, are entitled to preserve it. States shall not compel them to mix themselves with the main trends of the country. These communities can preserve, protect, and propagate their ways of living and or language. So, states shall also not compel them to mix themselves with the main trends. That being you are Christian people, now you are minority, do one thing, you mix yourself with the Hindu people, learn Hindu traditions, learn Hindu cultures, and adopt Hinduism. No, state should not compel these people. That is why we have these rights, right to set up their own educational institutions and to receive funds from the state, and no discrimination by the state at all. One very common way of preserving a language culture is through education. Thus, rights are granted to these minorities to set up their own institutions and preserve their culture or language. State often gives financial assistance to private education institutions, as education is shared responsibility. Thus, in giving those assistance, states shall not deny it to the cultural linguistic institutions. These minorities are based upon the representation in the particular state as well as union. Thus, for India, a language may be a minority, such as there are fairly large number of Tamil speakers. Okay, thus for India, language may not be a minority. If we see India as a whole, okay, Tamil speakers are so many in number. So Tamil may not be a minority. However, if we go to Madhya Pradesh or Gujarat, Tamil language will be a minority. If you go to Madhya Pradesh or Gujarat, Tamil may be a minority. So, some educational institutions may be set up in Gujarat or Madhya Pradesh to propagate or to teach people Tamil language, and they will also acquire the status of a minority institutions in that particular state. Okay, we'll not count that language from the status of the language in the Tamil Nadu. No, we'll decide the status of language in Madhya Pradesh only. Similarly, Bengali may be a minority language elsewhere than Bengal itself. Some recognized cultural minority institutions are these are the examples of some recognized cultural minority institutions: St. Stephen's College, very popular college in Delhi University; DAV colleges or schools; St. Xavier College; Jain educational institutions; Sikh institutes; Buddhist monasteries; Muslim madrasas. Linguist minority: Mathili. These languages have been recognized as linguistic minorities: Mathili, Urdu, Sanskrit, or sign language. Yes, sign language is also recognized as a minority language. Like deaf and mute people, they use gestures to talk to each other. Gesture language also it is called. Okay, so they use gestures, and gestures are uniform. Suppose I, one deaf and mute, uses his hand and makes some movement in order to convey something, then all deaf and mute will do the same thing for conveying the same particular expression. Okay, they have uniformity in their language as well. This is a proper language. Or braille for blind people. These kind of educations languages get the status of linguistic minority. Now we come to the most important article of the Supreme Court, this Constitution of India, that is Article 32, right to constitutional remedies. Right to constitutional remedies. Now you all understand what is remedy. There cannot be a right without a remedy. Okay, a right, in order for a right to exist, there has to be a remedy. Remedy means seeking redressal for violation of your right. Okay, like what happened in the primitive society, X owns a plot. Okay, now Y will come up and he is more powerful. He takes the plot from X forcefully. Okay, now here, though X owned that particular plot, but now Y has come up and he is more stronger than the X and he has taken up the plot from the X forcefully. But though still X does not have any remedy here, because we are in the primitive system, there is no court, no police, so now X cannot do anything. X can either become more powerful, come back and take the plot back from him, or he'll have to relocate, go somewhere and find again a plot and establish his ownership by having a struggle with other people. So now suppose this constitution gives you a right to own a plot, but it does not give you a remedy. Okay, then what will happen? You own a plot, somebody will come take it up from you, and now you cannot go anywhere, you cannot go to the police, you cannot go to the court. What kind of right will it be? Okay, a right which cannot be redressed. Once your right is violated and you cannot go anywhere, then what kind of right it is? Okay, so there cannot be a right without a remedy. So in this case, the constitutional framers say that suppose your fundamental right is violated, okay, the right to move the Supreme Court by appropriate proceedings for the enforcement of rights conferred by this part is guaranteed. Right to move the Supreme Court. First of all, what right has been conferred to you is that you have a right to move to the Supreme Court, which is the highest court of land, by appropriate proceeding for enforcement of rights conferred by this part is guaranteed. It is guaranteed. See, we discussed three types of rights. Okay, we discussed there is a fundamental right, then there is a constitutional right, then there is a legal right, when we discussed the fundamental rights in the earlier slides. So now suppose my legal right is infringed. Okay, when my legal right is infringed, so I'll go to complaint and I'll go to the court. But in that case, what the procedure followed is I'll have to go to the lowest court first. Okay, then I'll have to go to the high court, then I'll go to the appeal within high court. Okay, within high court also you have appeal, then I'll go to the Supreme Court. Okay, this is the scenario, and in this scenario it will roughly take me 15 years for my case to reach Supreme Court. Okay, but fundamental rights are understood to be so relevant for a basic dignity or a basic living of a human being that constitution framers thought we cannot expect a person whose right has been violated to reach till the highest court of land for redressal after 15 years gap. Within 15 years, if this much time is taken to redress your fundamental right, then definitely this remedy means nothing to you. Remedy means remedy has to be effective. When we are talking about a remedy, remedy has to be effective. Effective remedy. Okay, so remedy has to be effective remedy. If it takes you 15 years for a redressal of a fundamental rights, then that remedy is not an effective remedy. That is why this particular article has been added here, which says you have a right to move to the Supreme Court by appropriate proceedings for the enforcement of right confers by this part only is guaranteed. This part guaranteed. Now we have other constitutional rights as well provided by the Constitution of India as a whole, but no, we cannot seek their redressal directly in the Supreme Court. We'll have to follow this particular set of appeal and trial and appeal pattern. But this part 3, fundamental rights, any right is violated, you can go to the Supreme Court straight away. The Supreme Court shall have power to issue directions or orders or writs, including writs in the nature of habeas corpus, mandamus, prohibition, quo warranto, and certiorari, whichever may be appropriate. Okay, writs is nothing but it's a judicial command. Okay, writ is nothing but a judicial command. It is the legal way of saying a judicial command. So, this article was described as heart and soul of the Constitution of India by Dr. Ambedkar. Dr. Baba Sahib Ambedkar, who was the founder and the draftman of the Constitution of India, described this particular right as heart and soul of the Constitution. Further, this article is also referred to as the custodian of the Constitution. The whole purpose of the fundamental rights will be nullified if there is no remedy provided to seek its enforcement. Thus, Article 32 provides that remedy and has given right to the individual to directly approach Honorable Supreme Court of India in case any fundamental right is violated by government agencies. The Supreme Court, also referred as conscience keeper of the Constitution of India, has 5 writs which it could issue when violation of fundamental right is brought to its knowledge. Now, how many writs can Supreme Court issue when there is a violation of fundamental rights? There are 5 kinds of writs and they are mentioned in the Constitution itself: habeas corpus, mandamus, prohibition, quo warranto, and certiorari. Now we will read about these writs in detail. Habeas corpus. Okay, habeas. This is a Latin term which means have it here. have it here. Corpus means the body. Okay, so literally this word translates to bring the body, have it here, the body, bring the body here, habeas corpus. Under this writ, if any person is arrested, detained by state agencies or even a private individual, the next related person may directly approach the Supreme Court, and Supreme Court shall set the person free and penalties will be imposed upon violators. Habeas corpus is a Latin phrase which literally translates into bring the body. It means that court can simply order the production of individual so detained in the court and set him free thereupon. Like we discussed that we have a right to liberty in Article 21, right to life and liberty. Okay, now suppose X had been sentenced to 3 years jail. Now he is in the behind the bars, but he has completed his 3 years sentence. But somehow jail superintendent demands some money from the X in order to release him. Now his term of sentence is complete. He has already under suffered 3 years jail sentence. Now jail superintendent doesn't leave him. He says, "No, you pay me 2 lakh rupees only. Then only I'll release you, or I'll keep on making some problem in your paper so that you are not released and your release is delayed." So in that case, this person or any person related to him, next person related, his wife, his son, his brother, his father, his mother, or his friend, they can directly reach to the Supreme Court and file a habeas corpus petition that this person has already undergone the sentence and now please set him free. The Supreme Court then will order superintendent of jail to appear and reply. Then the superintendent will say his documents are not proper. Then Supreme Court will say within these 3 years you should have completed those documents in proper format. Now you cannot take any extra time. Set this person free immediately and pay this penalty as well as a compensation for keeping this person in jail for extra time. This is what may happen with a jail superintendent or a police personnel also. Sometimes what happens, X committed a crime, okay, and X has run away. Ran away. Now, what police will do in order to pressurize X to come back and surrender, they will pick X family members and detain them in order to make pressure upon the X. Now, this cannot be done. If this is done, there may be a habeas corpus against this police personnel directly in the Supreme Court of India, and he shall be answerable. Suppose I have committed some crime, my father, mother, and brother, they are not responsible for it, only I am responsible for it. So, police usually does this practice. Now, it doesn't do it that frequently. Earlier, they used to pick all the family members and put them behind the bars in the lockup in order to make pressure upon the X. Okay, now that cannot be done. We can have a habeas corpus petition filed against them, or usually it is used in the family court matters as well. Family disputes where one spouse has run away or taken the minor child and eloped somewhere. Okay, one spouse has taken the minor child illegally and went somewhere and is now non traceable. So, other spouse can go to the court and file a habeas corpus that see, though we have a dispute but child is shared, we both should have a right to meet the child. She or he is not letting me meet the child, detained the child somewhere illegally, order her to release the child or him to release the child. So in that case, Supreme Court will again issue appropriate orders. Okay, now the other writ is writ of mandamus. It always lies against the public authority for some task. Now let me make one thing clear, that out of these five writs, only habeas corpus is such which will be which can be filed even against a private individual like a family dispute manner. Otherwise, all these writs will lie only and only against a public authority and never against a private authority. Against a public authority for some task. This kind of writ stems from the word mandatory. This mandamus is the Latin term which means mandatory in the English term. Thus, if any particular duty task is mandatory for fulfillment of any fundamental right, then the Supreme Court may direct the state to perform it, such as if the bridge has collapsed and the village is cut off from the mainstream and the government is not reconstructing the bridge. Then a mandamus will lie against the government and government can be bound down to reconstruct the bridge. Similarly, if any particular area does not have any basic hospital for wide range such as 200-kilometer radius, no hospital, then a mandamus will lie and government could be compelled to set up a hospital. This description is very easy to understand. It simply means that something is to be done in order to effect your fundamental rights and that thing is not being done by the government and government is duty bound to do it. Then you can directly approach the Supreme Court, like in the case of this bridge has collapsed. Okay, now bridge has collapsed and the village has only one mode of connection with the city or urban life, and now their village does not have emergency services like hospital or school or something, or food grains as well, so they are dependent upon the city. But the bridge has collapsed and even after delay of 1 to 2 months government is not willing to construct it. Okay, now they can go to the Supreme Court and say that this collapse of the bridge has derailed our fundamental rights. We have a right to life and liberty and right to education. I cannot go to the college, I cannot go to the hospital. What right of life do I have? They ask government to direct the government to construct the bridge. The government will construct the bridge. They will be directed by the writ of mandamus. Writ of prohibition, public authority not to do something. So mandamus is a positive writ that you do something. Prohibition is a negative writ. You do not do something. Okay, prohibition will lie against a public authority. In this kind of writ, public authority could be stopped from doing any particular activity which takes away any fundamental right from the public, such as felling of trees by the government could be prohibited in the interest of the right to environment. Similarly, if any state government plans to take back all the public transport system from roads, it could be prohibited. Or if a state government wants to demolish a state school and construct a mall there, a writ of prohibition would lie. Now you understand what we are discussing about. I live in Delhi. Suppose Delhi government says that from next month onwards, Delhi government will not run any state buses on the roads. We take back all the roads and only private buses or private transport will be there. This cannot be the position. Everyone cannot afford a private transport or cannot be supposed to have a private vehicle. People live on the basis of public transport and government is bound to provide public transport. So a writ of prohibition will lie and government will be directed to take back its plan, or government will be directed to stop cutting of trees in the interest of environment. Okay, or not to demolish a school just to open up a shopping mall there, as shopping mall could be set up anywhere but school has to be the basic requirement first. Writ of quo warranto, what authority you have. Okay, writ of quo warranto means what authority you have. It will lie against a public office holder. Public office holder. Okay, against him this writ of quo warranto will lie. Now, you take an example. See, quo warranto will lie against any person who has usurped means illegally taken up, any public office by force or wrongful means. Thus, if a member of parliament has won the election by corrupt practices, quo warranto will lie. Okay, so now someone has become a member of parliament, but he has hidden his age. His age, like minimum age is 25 years. But at the time of election, he was less than 25. That means he could not have contested the election. So now, if uh, he was less than 25, he has hidden it. Now, if it comes out in open, a quo warranto will lie against him as to tell us why you should not be removed from your office. When you won election, you were less than 25, which is less than the basic requirement. Any unqualified person has been selected by the government overlooking qualified persons. Okay, now there is a job opening for engineers and the engineering degree is BTech, but somehow the government, uh, in conspiracy with some other high profile people, have hired a person who is only diploma. Okay, who's only diploma holder in ITI. We cannot call them engineers. So now unqualified person has been hired, though there was already qualified people willing to take this job. Now this person, because he does not have the qualification, does not have authority to hold this particular post, but okay, government has installed him. Now what can we do? We can go to the Supreme Court. Kyo varan to will lie. It literally means court would make inquiry from person as to what authority he has to occupy that public office. If he could not satisfy, he would be removed, such as state government appoints 200 government teachers, but none of them is having required educational qualification. Cure warrant of lie, and they all shall be removed. Okay, certiorari legal proceedings are not followed. This kind of writ will lie only against This kind of writ will lie only against a judicial authority. This type of writ will lie only against a judicial authority. Sometimes a judicial authority may not follow a particular lawful procedure and may venture beyond the powers conferred upon it. In those cases, certiorari will lie, such as under the scheme of criminal justice administration, the maximum punishment for theft is 3 years jail. However, a judge orders a convict to serve 5 years jail for theft. A certiorari will lie. This example is very self-explanatory. Suppose X committed theft. Now, Indian Penal Code says if somebody commits theft, he shall be punishable up to 3 years jail term. So, maximum jail time which one judge can order him is 3 years. But now some judge says you are sentenced to jail for 5 years. That what he has done is he has overreached his powers. His powers were only to sentence him till 3 years. What he has done is he has sentenced him to 5 years. That cannot be done. A certiorari will definitely lie in that case. So now we close our fundamental rights. Now we go to directive principles of the state policy, which is part 4 of the Constitution of India. Okay, the directive principles constitute a very comprehensive social, economic, and political program for a modern and welfare state. These principles emphasize that the state shall try to promote welfare of people by providing them basic facilities like shelter, food, and clothing. Unlike fundamental rights, the directive principles of state policy are non-binding in nature, which means they are not enforceable by the courts for their violation. Like we discussed when we are discussing the overview of the Constitution of India, fundamental rights are negative rights because state is not required to do much, energy is not required, much resources are not required to implement your fundamental rights. But these directive principles of state policy are the guiding principles. They guide state how state has to function, in what manner they have to proceed. But because country was very poor or not sufficiently rich enough in the resources at that time, so as to provide these basic facilities to everyone, so that is why these were kept non-binding, or we may say other word is non-justiciable. They were kept non-justiciable. You could not have gone to the court to seek their fulfillment. Why? Because it requires a lot of resources. Setting up of a college or a hospital may require 50 100 crore rupees, which the government may not have that particular point of time. Okay, but these are guiding principles that if not today but tomorrow, you should have this particular kind of setup in the government, in the economy, or in the country. However, the Constitution itself declares that these principles are fundamental in the governance of the country, and it shall be the duty of the state to apply these principles in making laws. Hence, they impose a moral obligation on the state authorities for their implementation, not a legal obligation, only a moral obligation. Features of the directive principle of state policy. These are the features. It constitutes a very comprehensive social, economic, and political program for modern democratic state, which aimed at realizing the high ideals of justice, liberty, equality, and fraternity as outlined in the preamble of the Constitution. They embody the concept of a welfare state, which was absent during the colonial era. So, when we did preamble, we read that preamble declares India as a country which ensures justice, liberty, equality, and fraternity to all its citizens. Okay. So these directive principle of state policy is nothing but an attempt to proceed in a direction or in a manner that such these ideals are attained, and the citizens are able to live with this particular dream, Indian dream of the preamble. We'll do in very brief what these directive principles are. State to secure a social order for the promotion of welfare of the people. The state shall strive to promote the welfare of the people by securing and protecting as effectively as it may, a social order in which justice, social, economic, and political shall inform all the institutions of national life. It simply says that state should conduct its affairs in such a manner that every citizen feels safe and they all feel that justice is being done to them in all spheres, social, economic, and political life, and overall welfare of the state is promoted. Okay, it is not that they will promote only Hindu welfare or Muslim welfare or no, or some Karnataka welfare or Tamil Nadu welfare or Delhi only. No, they have to develop all the areas. When they are developing Mumbai and Delhi, they should equally time develop Bihar and UP and other areas of the country as well. So they should proceed in a manner in which whole welfare of the people is taken care of. The state shall, in particular, strive to minimize the inequalities in income and endeavor to eliminate inequalities in status, facilities, and opportunities not only against individuals but also among group of people residing in different areas or engaged in different vocations. Okay, this is to do about the salary gap. Okay, income inequality. So I say, President of India, who is the topmost post in the government of India, has only one post available for one people out of 130 crore people. He draws a salary of 5 lakh rupees per month. Okay, and a normal primary school teacher also earns around 50,000 rupees per month. Okay, so what is the gap between the salary? What is the difference between the salary? Is only 10 times, and 10 times difference within between the salary is not very much given the portfolio and job and the status of these two people. Why this is so? Why president is not getting 5 crore rupees and he's not getting 5,000 only? Because the DPSP says that income inequality should not be very much. Okay, so the top post and somehow a normal post are having a gap of only 5 lakh rupees. Certain principles of policy to be followed by the state. The state shall, in particular, direct its policy towards securing that the citizens, men and women, equally have the right to an adequate means of livelihood. Now it says adequate means of livelihood. It means that it has to be adequate. Suppose today grains are 40 rupees per kg and a family requires 10 grains, 10 kg grains per month. Okay, now you pay someone, suppose 800 rupees. Okay, 800 rupees per month salary, and then call this salary a adequate livelihood. No, this won't be an adequate livelihood because out of this 400 rupees are gone towards the purchasing of grain only. Okay, now when he needs grain, he needs electricity as well, he needs water as well, he needs some rents as well. Okay, he has educational expenses for the kids as well. So you cannot say that his monthly requirement is 400 only for grain and we have given him 400 additional. That means sufficient livelihood is there. No, this won't be there. But yes, suppose you say you pay him 3000 rupees per month. Now we can say that yes, now he is getting adequate means of livelihood. So men and women equally should have adequate livelihood. States should not give salaries which are very less as compared to the cost of living index. That the ownership and control of the material resources of the community are so distributed as to best subserve the common good. That the operation of the economic system does not result in the concentration of wealth and means of production in the common detriment. It means there should not be concentration of economic wealth in few hands. Okay, it should be distributed equally. All people should have equal amount of money, somehow nearby equal. That there is equal pay for equal work for both men and women. This is very relevant. Earlier, what used to happen, for the same job, men would get 100 rupees and women would be paid only 30 rupees. It used to happen and it is still happening at so many quarters in India. Okay, that there is a wage disparity between men and women. So the Constitution of India says private people may be doing it, we are not concerned, but government shall never do this. Government shall always pay both men and women equally. So if for same job men is getting 100 rupees, women will also get 100 rupees only. That the health and strength of workers, men and women, and the tender age of children are not abused, and citizens are not forced by economic necessity to enter avocations unsuited to their age or strength. That means somebody's economic compulsion should not be abused in such a manner that they are made to do something which is not fit for their age or their strength. Like you ask an old person to lift heavy loads, no, it is going to break his back. Or you ask a child, 10-year-old, to work in mine, coal mine, it can't be done. See, these people are poor. Now this child, 10-year-old, he is also unfortunately very poor. This old person also unfortunately very poor. Now they need money to live, they need money to buy food. For that they will definitely do the work. If you will ask 10-year child to go and work in the coal mine, definitely he will do so because he doesn't have any option. And this person also will try to lift heavy loads. But you should not do so. State shall not abuse citizens like this. Okay, private people may do so, and state has made laws to check this thing as well, but states should not at first place do so. If they want to pay old person and they want him to work as well, they should give some work which is best suited to his strength and his age. That children are given opportunities and facilities to develop in a healthy manner and in conditions of freedom and dignity, that childhood and youth are protected against exploitation and moral and material abandonment. Again, the same thing, that children should be given education. We have Article 21A now, which gives you right to education, in which kids are sent to the school, they are paid money, they are given uniform, they are given books, they are given food, they are given extracurricular things as well. Equal justice and free legal aid. Justice should be equal for everyone. It should not be that a politician is getting a justice within 2 years and a common man it takes 20 years. No, it should not be there. It should be equal for everyone, and free legal aid. If someone is not able to defend himself, if someone is very poor, then state should provide a legal representation to him as well. State should provide lawyer to him free of cost. Organization of village panchayats. We have village panchayats due to because of this article, or this particular yes, article 40, which said the state should have village panchayats. But when the country became independent, we did not have resources to establish village panchayats, or we didn't have the infrastructure. So somehow it took us around 30-40 years, and by 1990 India had village panchayats. Okay, that is why these directive principle of state policy take time in completion, and this is a slow transitional process. Right to work, to education, and to public assistance in certain cases. Okay, state shall provide you work as well. If you do not have work, and if you do not have work, they will provide you public assistance. Like there are schemes like MG Narega or Narega. These are Pradhan Mantri schemes in which jobless youths are provided 100 or 200 days of labor every year, and then they are paid as well. Or there are schemes like old age pension, widow pension, BPL pension. Okay, there are schemes which government is running. If someone is old age, he cannot work, he does not have money, we'll give him pension. Widow will give pension. BPL people will give pension. Why does government do this? Manrega, Narega, and this. Why? Because DPSPs say so that you have to provide assistance or employment. Provision for just and human conditions of work and maternity relief. Now we have a lot of discussion going over this particular thing, that is called maternity leave and benefits. Okay, so this is also very new concept, though it was there in foreign, but in India we very rarely followed these maternity leave and benefits. But now government is providing a great deal of maternity leave and benefits to employees, and it is made mandatory for even the private employees. Why government is doing so? Because this directive principle of state policy says that you have to make provision for this living wage etc for workers. Okay, living wage means a wage should be such in which salary should be such in which they can sustain themselves, plus something additional is left for saving or for enjoyment of the life. Okay, for enjoyment of the life. Suppose someone wants to travel with his family or take his kids to a sightseeing, but he does not have enough wage to take them to that particular place. So this is not a living wage. Living wage should be such that after doing all his essential spendings, he still has some money left which he can spend in enjoying the luxury of the life with the family or friends. Participation of workers in management of industries, that means trade labor unions should also be a part of management. They should also have a voice. So we have labor unions due to this particular article. Promotion of cooperative societies. Cooperative societies are a win-win situation for both. In these societies, people and group of people come together and they manufacture things and set up their own plants, and everybody gets work and people are benefited in the large scale. The most famous example is Amul India, which is a cooperative society, and now it has become a very well renowned international brand because of the hard work of the people and the cooperative effort of the all the people involved. Uniform civil code for the citizens. It says that the state shall try to have a uniform laws, uniformity in laws for marriage, divorce, separation, succession, etc. Okay, so in marriage divorce, now we all have different laws. Hindu have different laws, Muslim have different laws, Christian have different laws. State shall come up with such a plan that all people have, irrespective of their religion, same kind of laws, so that there have to be uniformity. No gap in the law is abused by anyone. Okay, provision for early childhood care and education to children below age of 6 years. Promotion of educational and economic interest of scheduled castes, scheduled tribes, and other weaker sections. It is because of this particular article that state has provided reservation to the SC, ST, OBC, and now EBC by the Modi government, economic backward classes by the Modi government. Duty of the state to raise the level of nutrition and the standard of living and to improve public health. Now this is the kind of directive principle which is used by state of Bihar and Gujarat in defending their alcohol prohibition. Alcohol prohibition, that they say that consumption of alcohol is bad for the health, that is why we are banning it. And when there's a challenge that how can you ban the consumption of alcohol, then they say we are authorized by the directive principles of state policy to improve public health, or laws like no loud music after 10 p.m. in the night. Okay, this is why, because it is against the public health or the level of standard of living as well. Organization of agriculture and animal husbandry. We'll organize agriculture and animal husbandry in such a manner that these fields are not left behind, farmers are not left behind, or the people who pasture animals are not left behind. Protection and improvement of the environment and safeguarding of forest and wildlife. We have to definitely maintain our ecology, our environment, our flora and fauna. This is our rich and composite heritage and culture of India, and we have to preserve it. Protection of monuments and places of objects of national importance. Like there are so many monuments, like Taj Mahal is very famous. Then when this Chinese premier Xi Jinping visited Madurai, there is a stone called Atlas stone, which never falls but is like to fall. It is located in Tamil Nadu only. It is known by different names. So these kind of monuments and places are places of national importance. We have to protect them. Separation of judiciary from the executive, that means we should have an independent judiciary and no interference in the judicial work by the government or the any government agency. Promotion of international peace and security. We should conduct ourselves in such a manner that international peace and security is promoted. Now we go to fundamental duties. Okay, we'll just briefly read them. Fundamental duties were originally not part of the Constitution of India. They were added wide 70 42nd amendment to the constitution, and in 1976. So they were added later fundamental duties. These duties are very basic duties which a citizen can contribute for the country, but they are non-justiciable. Okay, that means if a citizen is not fulfilling his duties, state cannot take any action. Okay, it is left to the wisdom of the people that whether you have to follow this duty and how you have to follow this duty. To abide by the constitution and respect its ideals, institutions, national flag and national anthem, that is, we have to respect our country as a whole. To cherish and follow the noble ideas which inspired our freedom struggle. Our freedom struggle has been very dear one. It costed us 250 years, a lot of bloodshed, a lot of loss of property and people and lives and comfort of the people. So we should never forget the cost of the freedom which we attained. Okay, so we should always keep these noble ideas in our mind and conduct our life. To uphold and protect the sovereignty, unity, and integrity of the India, we should always conduct ourselves in such a manner that India remains intact and secure. To defend the country and render national service when called upon to do so, now like COVID 19, various nurses, police, bank employees, army, firefighters, etc. These people have been on the front line in fight against the COVID-19, and they could also have refused their duties, but they came up when they were called, and so many other citizen and charitable organizations came up to assist the India. To promote harmony and spirit of common brotherhood among all the people of India, transcending religious, linguistic, and regional, to promote common brotherhood within the people of India, despite their differences in religion or language or region. So I may be from Delhi, you may be from Tamil Nadu, I may be Hindu, you may be a non-Hindu, but still we should all be brothers. To renounce practices derogatory and dignity to the woman. See, we all have women in different spheres of our life, in different relations of our life, and we all respect them. But it is not that we should respect only women in our family, but we should treat every woman like a woman of our own family. To value and preserve the rich heritage of our composite culture, to protect and improve the natural environment, including forests, lakes, rivers, wildlife, and we have compassion for the living creatures. If nature is safe, we people are safe, and we should have compassion for the living creatures. To develop the scientific temper, humanism, and spirit of inquiry and reform, we should have a scientific temper. We should test everything before believing it. To safeguard public property and to abjure violence, we have to keep public property in good health, and we should not hurt public property or uh, damage public property. Like sometimes in riots, people do so, we should not do that. To strive towards excellence in all spheres of individual and collective activity so that nation constantly rises to higher levels of endeavor and achievement. We should all be excellent in whatever we do. Who is a parent or guardian to provide opportunity for education to his child, or the case may be ward between the age of 6 to 14 years. Now this duty is cast upon parent and guardian that you should make arrangement for the education of your child between 6 to 14 years of age and not let him go to the work.